So before I get started with the introductions, I want to make sure everybody knows about the sign-in here. You've already signed up online. The sign-in here is really to help you find a team if you're still looking for that. That's one reason why I'm having you double check your team information over here. And I'm going to explain this right now before I forget. So when you look at that form, the first thing you see is your email. Make sure I have that correct. If you want to use a different email, now is the time to fix that. One email per volunteer. Don't give me 2 emails, please. And you need to check your zip code. I need your zip code. And you need to check your team status, okay? And there are 3 categories. You, on your SurveyMonkey thing, you either said you have a team already, don't worry about me. You said you may want some help finding a team, or you said you're forming your own team. Okay, so you're all each in one of those 3 categories. Please check that I have you in the right category, because in the next couple of weeks I'm going to be working to help those of you who don't have a team yet find team members in your approximate geography using your zip code to get people close to one another, and also your email, obviously. So so take a look at that on the break, or if you didn't get a chance to look at it as you were coming in. All right. So, and this is Lori, by the way. Lori, this is my partner in crime.
Hi, everybody.
Lori's with Metro, and I am with Kingfisher Ecological Services. And this project, let's see, I don't want that. Okay, so here's the overview of the agenda again, kind of what we're going to be doing. If Judy hasn't quite arrived when I'm done here in about 20 minutes, we're going to have Ed go first. So there might be a little scramble here when Judy comes in and we load her talk. She was not able to get it to me in advance. Okay, so the handouts, hopefully you should all have in your packet. Make sure you have the training agenda for tonight, and you have some safety and emergency information. And you have a fulcrum quick start document. It's not as quick as I would like. It's 4 pages. Ted tried very hard to make it short and sweet, but we'll talk about that more later. And you have a mileage reimbursement form, okay? If you have other people who you're sort of here for tonight, please take a packet for them. That would help us. And get them a packet. And I will say one thing about these forms. There's going to be more forms coming that are going to be online. We are mean and lean with this operation. A lot of the tools we'll be using are online, and you'll submit trick reports and sign-ups all online. The only paper form you'll be using is the mileage reimbursement form, and I'm going to talk about that more later. So you'll need to keep hold of that. You'll be making copies of it, possibly, if you turn in more than one of those. Okay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this effort and how it fits in with the bigger effort that is part of the Regional Conservation Strategy. And we are an offshoot of the Intertwine Alliance. Okay, one of the recommendations coming out of the Regional Conservation Strategy was to develop a map of threatened Oregon white oak woodlands for the region. Okay, and as you'll hear in a minute, we have pretty good maps to the north of us in the Puget Trough and to the south of us in the rest of the Willamette Valley. But this region is a gap in the range distribution of this ecosystem, and we don't have very good maps. We have had sporadic attempts to develop maps for portions of the geography, but no coordinated region-wide effort, which is what you are going to be participating in. There are 16 partners active in our oak mapping work group. Groups like Portland Audubon, 12 Hills Park and Recreation District, who are helping host these trainings, conservation districts, and more. Okay, our goal is to develop the seamless regional map of this threatened ecosystem to help natural resources planners develop park plans into the future, to help direct restoration, to help define corridors and connect natural areas across the region. this effort is bigger than just the citizen science part, the OakQuest part that you're going to be part of. There is an effort spearheaded at Metro to use remote sensing to create a best guess of where oak is. And we're going to pair that with your work. And it also includes professional field surveys that there may be opportunities to help out in later in the summer. And it includes a conservation leadership component working with a Native American Youth and Family Center. I want to take a second to introduce Savannah Jackson, who is one of 2 Native American Youth and Family Center employees that are helping me with orchestrating this crazy effort. 150 volunteers. Stop signing up.
Really?
So now Savannah and her coworker Sequoia just started on Monday. So she's here to listen and learn like you guys. Judy, welcome. This is Judy. Judy Bluehorse Skelton. We'll take a break. Sure. So I am really excited about this partnership. And part of this effort is to grow job skills and partnerships with tribal youth and tribal organizations in the region. There was a glaring omission in the regional conservation strategy. There wasn't a lot of engagement with tribes. And so this is part of that effort to build those relationships, okay? And Judy, who just walked in, is also incredibly critical to this effort, and she's been helping me kind of get an idea of how we're going to do this. So the funders for this effort: Metro Nature and Neighborhoods, Oregon Wildlife Heritage Foundation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through their Surrogate Species Program. Thank you to every one of them. And our key funding piece for this summer was this. We just got the green light about 3 weeks ago, so we've had to go from like standing to a sprint very rapidly. So if there's missing pieces, that's why, okay? If you have questions at the end, we'll have a chance. This is our focus right now. The bold line outlining the region there is the regional conservation strategy. And I know this is a little hard to see, but there's a yellow hatch area. That's where we're focusing our work with OakQuest initially, because that's where we have the best remote sensing data, okay? So if we like what we see this year, we're going to do more, and we'll expand it, okay? Pending supplemental funding to do that. So, so yeah. And I should also say it doesn't currently include the Washington portion of the Regional Conservation Plan area, okay? Because they have maps. They have something. We have very little. Key partners in this, me, Kingfisher Ecological Services, which is me. No employees. This is one project that I'm working on. This is the summer's project for me. Native American Youth and Family Center, I mentioned Savannah, and Nellie McConville has been a key partner in helping figure out how to get Savannah and Sequoia on board and do this work. Lori Hennings, you met. Jonathan Soul, who's not here tonight at Metro. Mike Hauk, who's serving as the Urban Green Spaces Institute, is serving as the fiscal sponsor for the grants. And I mentioned Judy, and I mentioned Ed, and you'll get to hear them in a second. So now, if we could just take a second, and I literally mean not much time, please come in. Are you here for the training?
Yes, hi.
Yeah, come on in. Grab a seat. Yeah, we'll catch you up on the break. I would like to take, I think, 5 minutes to kind of like go around the room and just give me your name and your neighborhood and how you, that's enough. That's enough. Your name and your neighborhood. So less than one sentence, because we don't have too much time. And let's start with Judy.
Well, hi, I'm Judy Bluehorse Skelton, and I live in the Westmoreland neighborhood, southeast Portland.
I'm Galen Beatty, and I live in Sellwood, and I also work for Columbia Land Trust, do the Backyard Habitat Program, and our meadowscaping initiative is a really nice complement to this OakQuest project.
Yeah. I'm Michelle Bickley, and I live in St. John's.
I'm Jennifer Thompson, and I live just a little bit east of here, very close.
Savannah Jackson, I live in Milwaukee.
I'm Micah Meskel, and I work in Humboldt neighborhood in Northeast.
Bonnie Schaffner, and I live in Hollywood, which is Northeast.
live in Garvey, and I work in Alberta, Alberta. Or I live there. I'm Amira. I live in North Portland, close to St. John's.
Sean and I live in Berlin. Jean Herline, Surrey Island, land of big oaks. Yeah. Jean Peters, Surrey Island.
Michael Babbitt, Southeast.
Southeast.
Carolyn Dunn, I live in Malino, which is in rural Clackamas County.
Lindsay Cottle, North Portland.
Lucy Barnett, Laurelhurst in Northeast Portland.
Lisa Beatty, the Island Station neighborhood in Milwaukee.
Danielle Shepherd, historic Milwaukee.
Joanne Bird, Island Station, Milwaukee.
Johnny King, Selwood.
Sean, North Portland.
Ed Alverson, Eugene.
Lori Penny, Zaloa.
Christina Terry, Overlook.
Great. So kind of keep in mind, if you heard somebody that is close to you, you'll have a chance during the break to kind of see if they already have a team or if they might be interested in working with you if you're still looking for a team. And I'm going to talk more about how we'll form teams for people that don't yet have them later in the talk. All right. I think that's all I want to say, and I think we'll take just a couple minutes here so I can load Judy's talk on. And then we'll...
There. Oh, great. Yeah. So thank you for inviting me here this evening. I'm Judy Bluehorse Skelton. My father's family is Nez Perce. We're from Idaho. My mother's from Oklahoma. We're Cherokee and Chickasaw. But I've lived all my life here in the West and have continued to be very fortunate to have many share with me the really traditional uses of our native plants for food, medicine, ceremony, and healthy life ways. And I worked for many years with the Portland Public Schools Title VII Indian Education Office with our Native youth, 3 years old to high school. And now I'm at PSU in the Indigenous Nations Studies Department as full-time faculty the last few years. And I get to share a lot of what the 3-, 4-, and 5-year-olds loved doing with college students. And it's very similar. I think people love to be engaged with nature, the connection to the environment, but to use all of our senses to see, to taste, to smell, to touch, and to be outside. And we recognize that we are the environment. What are you doing, Ted? He's fine-tuning me.
Sorry.
So, okay.
It's not working now.
It's fine. So, I brought a few slides, and I brought a few materials tonight, too. And I know I only have 25 minutes, but in what little time we have, and future trainings when we get to spend more time, which I know you're going to be organizing, Ted, we'll have a full day. But I wanted to share a few hands-on items, and I will do that. But to start, I think I like to, can we take that X thing off?
That's what I was trying to do.
Is that what you were trying to do?
That's right.
Oh, I see what it's doing. Fine. Oh, and the color is very dark.
Let me try one thing. So go ahead and I'll just...
So you probably recognize that spot. If you didn't, that's the Columbia Gorge. The big river, Columbia, Nichiwana, as the tribes in this region refer to the big river. And what does it mean to belong? And when we talk about indigenous cultures and indigenous perspectives, we often ask, what is that relationship to place? And I think all of us are indigenous to the planet, and we connect through our air, our water, our land, and all of those things make us relatives. So we can ask ourselves, what does it mean for us personally, for our families? how long does one have to be in a place to be indigenous to that? So one of the things we talk a lot about in the 21st century is how do we re-indigenize in the 21st century landscape as Native people? But others are asking that, whether I'm here or in Scotland. They've also been had their landscape changed. And as salmon people, I felt a very kindred spirit with them. And I also felt their loss. So we can look around in many cultures, many nations, many countries are looking to not just salvage what's left, but to begin to restore and heal the land as well as the people. And I think this project is an invitation to not only assess the land and its current ecosystem and habitat and who's living there, and but how we want to move forward for those future 7 generations to come to see what's there. How does the land inform who we are? Anybody recognize, this isn't the Willamette Valley, but I had to leave this slide in. Anyone recognize this? It is. Good, Ted. Good. You get a camas bulb. Wallowa Lake, homeland to my dad's people, sacred to us. We don't go into the lake. It's difficult to watch people speeding along on jet skis and stuff, but important to remember for everyone, including a new generation of young Native men and women that are coming into this field, that these places have their own intrinsic value, their own intrinsic right to exist, and are our ultimate elders and teachers in how we're going to live here. When we stray from what the land is dictating has to happen, we get into trouble pretty fast, because rivers and landforms and weather and mountains, whether they're volcanic or else, they will remind us, oh, this is how the people have been living here a long time, if we're going to continue to live here a long time in a good way. So they have to be our partners. We're not telling them what to do. We're working intimately with the land and all of those elements to help us with these projects. Help us with how we live. Also Eastern Oregon. Anyone recognize this one, Ted? It's Imnaha. It's the Imnaha River. This is where we were born and raised. It is our native country. It is impossible for us to leave. I just wanted to share that quote from Chief Olcott of the Nez Perce to set the tone and to recognize that even when we leave, we are still here. I think many of you, if you're gardeners, if you're hikers, if you're Audubon people, you know what home feels like. And even when you travel a long time or go far away, you're still here. I like this slide. This is Marcus Ammerman, native artist. This is actually in the Portland Art Museum's collection. It's only this tall. It's on display right now. It periodically gets rotated out. Microscopic beadwork. But I just love, that's Mount Hood, that's the Portland skyline. Just kind of saying we're still here and still working to restore and collaborate on the land and this place that we all call home. Oh, I include this slide. This also isn't the Willamette Valley, but this is the Buckhorn Mountains. This is a medicine wheel over at the top of the sky, 10,000 feet elevation above timberline, and visited it periodically with family. I put that in there to remind us of the cycles, the seasonal living, that when we work with land, when we are part of that seasonal lifestyle, that we have models we can look to, and I'll be sharing some of these with Ted and future trainings with Savannah and Sequoia. I like to collect these. Plateau, again, that's more my homeland, but it's connected. It is Camas country, and it's also salmon people. But we get a sense of how one lives on the land and what our activities are. You can see wintertime, December, storytelling, ceremony, food is adequate because you've been busy in the summer and fall gathering it. Spring is actually the toughest time to get through because you're waiting for everything to come up. If you haven't, I wanted to share this. I know we're going to be partnering with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. I just spoke with two folks, and I can share that more with Ted, Mr. Red Wolf, and Carmouche yesterday. They're real excited to get more involved. They're already, tribes are already very involved with land management. A lot of our reservation land abuts onto Forest Service, BLM, and so tribes have invested for a long time in staff and expertise to help with the management of not just reservation lands, but as in treaty language, our usual and accustomed places. Example of that would be Warm Springs going over to Mount Jefferson to pick huckleberries. Not part of the intact reservation that you might think of if you're going over to Canita or Warm Springs land, but much of the Columbia and, well, all of the Columbia and Willamette rivers, for instance, are part of the treaties with the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Yakima Nation in Washington, and Nez Perce tribe in Idaho, because of the historic regional living system or living lifeway. Ted's earlier slide showed a very large region. That includes a lot of tribes coming to this area from time immemorial to hunt, to fish, to trade, huge economy. We live this place, the Columbia, the confluence with the Willamette, huge economy, one of the largest pre-contact. So here again we get, and this is shared on the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde's website. I think that's a great resource, and we can put together a resource page for volunteers so you can familiarize yourself. Hard to cover it in 25 minutes in the time we'll have in future volunteer training, but certainly I'll have some resources so you can familiarize yourself with not just the plants, but again, that flow of seasonal living. And I wanted to share, I want to really applaud Metro. Rick Scrivens there is handing me, anybody recognize the plant? Yeah, this is out at Multnomah Channel. It's a really exciting collaboration on, after cleaning up an industrialized river system or industrialized valleys and ecosystems, previous practices that are not sustainable. The efforts to clean and reclaim the land are really transformative. Being out there that day, we have Siletz tribal members, some of the students from PSU's Indigenous Nation Studies, expert on Wapato, Melissa, I can't think of her last name, wrote her dissertation on it here. And then Rick, these Wapato are living in my pond, what's left of them, that the raccoons haven't eaten, waiting to go into the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Portland area office in just a few blocks away, but north of here. So a lot of these efforts to, part of restoring these lands is restoring our access to plants. They're not tested, we're not going to be eating these yet, but we're looking forward to future opportunities to test, maybe with PSU Science. This was an outing to dig camas, and again, hosted by Deb and Rick Scrivens and Kurt Zonick. As PSU students and the group of Intertribal Gathering Garden, which is a Native American Advisory Council to Portland Parks and Rec, and Metro has been participating. So we came out for the day to look at this 145-acre camas prairie and oak savanna. I was focused on camas, but there's oak in the background. A young woman, Cow Creek Band, around Roseburg, if you're not familiar with Cow Creek, also camas and salmon people. Very pregnant, and she dug the first camas. I think a Native woman has dug on that site in probably more time than we want to think about. So she used a traditional digging stick, and her dad made this for me and presented it to me this last spring when we were out there again with Metro. This was 2013, and everybody kind of looking on. Native student living out in Scappoose. She dug those, very proud of her camas. I will pass a couple of these around so you can see them. They right now are in their seed form. So they're like rattles. Let me just pass. You can take a look. We'll turn the light on again, but you can at least. These will be replanted at PSU's Native American Student and Community Center's rooftop garden. So it's just, I shared this part. I think this is what Ted was asking me, that the kind of work this project embodies is very far-reaching, certainly mapping, but we're looking at revitalizing the land and people, all people. And then the seeds. We went back out again in late July. We'll probably do that again when the seeds are perfectly ripe. And they're black, shiny, very tiny seeds there. This is when we were just out, May 31st. As word travels, more people are coming. We have Warm Springs family here in the foreground that joined, more NAIA youth, Metro out there, I think Heather's out there, and we had Jonathan Saul the first time. This time, I don't remember everybody's names, but we have Klamath folks there. Word is traveling. Just wanting to see again what it's like to be on that land. Deb with Clifton Bruno there and others. And if you haven't seen camas, I think anybody in this room probably knows camas backwards and forwards, but that's it blooming against a field of fragrant popcorn flower. Yes. We were told, yeah, so fragrant. We had some older women in the class, Native, who remember that fragrance, hadn't smelled it in a long time. It was very emotional, in a good way. People sat down. I didn't put all of those slides in here, but people sat down and just, I also encouraged little people, children to come out. This is Shauna with the baby in her back, who she was pregnant with before. You see the little feet and the little hand. She's digging camas bulbs, and Isabel LaCourse, who's with Tualatin Riverkeepers Environmental Education Coordinator, whose Colville tribe is also using the traditional digging stick. And taking our treasures, the end of the day, heading back. And Ho-Chunk, which is Winnebago, far away, but also Klamath, Modoc people. 6-year-old Cecily came out, and Deb Scrivens snapped this photo as we were heading back up for, and I didn't load these pictures either, for lunch, a potluck. And so that's, I can share a little bit more. That's the slides if people want to turn up the lights so you can see the bulbs passing around, and I'll share the stick. I think it's important to know that because of colonization, we are, and termination. I don't know if we've talked about that, but it's important to know that many of the tribes in Oregon were the U.S. policy of termination. They were no longer recognized by the federal government. And so that was the case with the Klamath tribe, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz, the Cow Creek Band, the Siuslaw, the Coquel, all were terminated just in the last century. A lot of elders passed on without being able to share their wisdom, their knowledge, their practices, as everyone was scattered. In the 70s, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians began to petition, and they were officially restored. So in the 80s, the Grand Ronde tribe was officially restored. So we have restoration powwows to celebrate being recognized again. That allows the community to function as a sovereign nation again, to provide education, to provide housing for elders, to conduct business, to the right to self-determination, and has empowered tribes to begin to get involved with land management, to preserve not just cultural significance of plants for basketry, but ceremony and these healthy foods. So this kind of work, when we look at an oak savanna and the ecosystem, when I was talking with David Lewis with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde a few weeks ago, he said, well, are they looking at everything? Are they looking at the whole ecosystem? Are they just wanting to look at oaks? Are they mapping everything else? I said, I don't know. I wish you would come and let's have these conversations, because there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of momentum. And there are a lot of interpretations of the hope and the promise that these kinds of projects and the works that tribes are already doing hold for the people. Are we eating camas root, which is in the lily family? It's a bulb. It's not really the root that we eat, the little thing, but it's the carbohydrate, starchy bulb there. Traditionally, that would be steamed in a pit. I like to share the story at the Lapway, my reservation interpretive center. Probably 15 years ago, the kids had done a display of traditional foods and current foods. And the traditional foods with the science boards and push pins in little Ziploc baggies were camas and bitter root and, balsam root. Just a lot of the traditional foods, dried salmon. And then on the other board, and it just cracked me up because it was certainly what I was raised on, was Cheetos in a little Ziploc bag, a Twinkie, which was probably left over from 100 years, and all the other foods, Oreos and things that kids and people are eating today. So we have this awareness that our ancestors, probably all of our ancestors, were eating a healthier diet when we were eating closer to the land. And when we moved indoors and when we were all separated from these live foods, whole foods, we began to suffer in our health, whether it's the skyrocketing type 2 diabetes in the Black community, the Chicano Latino community, certainly the Native community, where over half of Native people today have type 2 diabetes, which is preventable, but it calls for reclaiming that traditional diet. Camas is called sometimes a sweet little root. It is not sweet compared to a Twinkie, when kids have tried that, because I grow it also. But it's sweet compared to bitter root and a lot of other foods that we eat. These are foods that, well, Mike Hauk, is he in here tonight? No. Well, I can say this then. So Mike's always like, well, Judy, we can't have everybody going through the forest and foraging. And I said, no, we can't. And we're worried about that, because there's a huge group that's interested, well, there's a lot of people interested in how to forage or live with the land again. It's important to remember the ceremonies, or what we would say along the Columbia River, Tamanawit, which is the natural law, the sacred law, that says these are the rules we will have to follow to live here. And you never take too much, you ask permission, everything's done together, no one's running out and digging first root, no one's running out and picking all the huckleberries. If anything, what we're concerned about is, because there is not this shared ethic or ceremony where the young woman who has proven herself and has been selected by the elders to go out with the elder women to dig first root, or to pick the first berries, those ceremonial huckleberries. That was always the check and balance to keep things in a sacred way, in a good way. And then people could go out and pick. But without those ceremonies, or with an agreed upon how we will live here, then we're going to have some challenges again. One of the kids was saying, we need a welcome wagon. Anybody that moves to Oregon has to go through this whole thing of how we live here, and salmon, and what we don't do, and how. And it's like, well, yeah, that's an idea. I was surprised they even knew what a welcome wagon was. That was around when I was little. But it's something that we have an opportunity to with this project, whether that's through signage, interpretive signage, which all the tribes are involved with today. A big caution is not sharing what the plants do medicinally. We've checked in with elders when we built the rooftop garden at the Native American Center at PSU. This was 10 years ago with Nez Perce landscape architect Brian McCormick. The elders, they're uncomfortable if you put that out there, not meaning me, but if one puts that out there. We can say that it was used for, or still used for, utility or basketry or cordage, rope, whatever, tule mats. We're not growing tule on the roof, but we can say that it was used for ceremony and that it's still used for ceremony, that it's used for a food or a medicine. And that's been a guideline. Tribes are deciding on their own how much they want to share. So again, you might want to, if that's your interest, people are involved in this project for lots of reasons, but just know that almost all the tribes in Oregon have their own websites, and each year I see more and more being decided that they share. Grand Ronde has posted a 49-minute video on how to weave baskets with one of their elders, showing the sedge that she's using and other basketry materials. Language is being shared. But it's important to note that it's for them to decide. So Ted and I are having tea and going over those protocols, and so that those relationships were key. Very key. People coming in and out, Native people, have been the most researched. Those are sort of the running joke at PSU and academia. And so they're often the group, elders, children, and Native Americans get a red flag when students are getting ready to do their dissertation or research because of the history and taking that knowledge and kind of never seeing the person again. So I would say a huge component, and I feel like Ted is working with, we're working together on this, will be whatever relationship building can be established, that this is just the beginning. And I know that the tribes, especially Grand Ronde, has already been working for a long time, well, since 1986, restoration, with different agencies, federal and state. And I think it's important to point out, too, I'm giving you my Native American Studies 101 little overview with the treaties, but also to note that as a sovereign nation, tribes have government-to-government relations, so the state and the feds, not so much with the cities or an entity. Metro is unique. So this is really groundbreaking work. And in fact, Portland has been the first city with Mayor Sam Adams to propose and do a resolution with the tribes that I mentioned. Nez Perce, Yakima, Grand Ronde, Siletz, Warm Springs, and Umatilla, all who came on July 17th in 2012 now, 2011, in City Hall and spoke. Each tribal chair spoke about the good relations and why everyone needs to work together. So it's exciting. It's a good time to be working on this. I don't know if this is anything like what you were thinking, Ted.
No, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm very grateful.
I don't know what our time is. Is this little timer going off? Or? Yeah, I'll be electric. Do you have questions or something? Or do you want to save questions for later? Or?
Well, since you might depart, if anybody has any burning questions, let's maybe take a couple. One
sure.
Or two.
Thoughts or, yeah.
What is your vision from your perspective of what you would like to see from this project?
You know, I have to say I don't know enough really about what this project is supposed to be. I mean, I don't know what its outcomes are. I would love to, so I will tell you what I saw in it and what I see in it. Is an opportunity for direct collaboration with the urban Native community, especially a younger generation like Savannah and Sequoia, who I don't see here tonight, but others who are ready to go and work in these fields. You can work for your tribe, but tribes have limited how much they can do with just one area. But to be able to have a role to play in an urban setting or a suburban, I see it as a really, I want to see the relationships come out of that and how to build on that. Whether we're in an oak savanna or the Camas Meadow or the Wapato mud or whatever.
So
yeah, right. Thank you. That was, yeah. Anyone else? Question? Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks, Ted. I don't know if this was.
You know, Oregon white oak is really a flagship species for landscape that historically supported a wide range of plant communities that all had in common the importance of fire and really a connection to the long tenure of the people who lived in the Willamette Valley for the last many thousands of years. Do I need to put the microphone on?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah. Let's mic it up.
Yeah, and that's going to kind of tether me to the. There you go. To the spot, and
you tell me when you drop the lights.
Okay. Well, hopefully my slides aren't going to be too dark. And why don't you try leaving the lights somewhat up so people can.
Is that okay, like that?
Yeah, I think that'll work. Okay. Sorry, I'm in your guys' way. I can only go so far. So yeah, I live in Eugene, about 10 miles west of where I live. Archaeologists found a Camas oven, a very old Camas oven. When they did carbon-14 dating, it was like 7,000 years old. So that tells you how long people have been harvesting Camas and other native plants as part of their subsistence. 7,000 years ago, that's when plants were first being domesticated in the Middle East, and various animals were being domesticated. So that's a long history that our landscape has of this interaction between people and the flora and the fauna. So that's an important background point to keep in mind when we're talking about this range of plant communities, prairies, savannas, and oak woodlands, that are all kind of tied together by their open character, the flora, the fauna, and in large part, the way they were maintained over many thousands of years with fire. These are habitats with really high biodiversity value. A lot of plant and animal species that are really specialized, these kinds of habitats. If we lose them, we'll lose a large portion of our native biota. They've not gotten a lot of publicity in recent years compared to, say, salmon or old growth forests. But from a biodiversity standpoint, they're, in my mind, just as important. To start out with a little bit of historic information going back to the 1850s when the land was being surveyed to facilitate settlement. The information contained within these surveys is really valuable for telling us what the landscape was like. And I was part of a project to use this information to map the historic landscape of the Willamette Valley. This map is from a paper that was published in the journal Northwest Science in 2011. You can find it on the internet. And what it shows you is the Willamette Valley ecoregion from Portland to the north, I'll do a little pointing here, to south of Eugene. The lighter colors represent prairie and savanna, and there's kind of an olive green woodland. And so you can see the historic extent of the prairie and savanna, in particular in kind of the southern 3/4 of the valley. In the Portland area, there were patches of prairie, especially in Washington County, but a lot of savanna and woodland as well.
So there's no swamp?
Hmm?
So there's no swamp? I was seeing purple on that map.
It's really small.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could talk for an hour about that map, but So just to reiterate some points why this project is being done, as Ted mentioned, there's not really a good oak map for the Portland area. When wall-to-wall vegetation maps were done, there was a tendency to just map hardwoods. So that includes a lot of different species that aren't indicators of the same ecological conditions, like cottonwood, maple, willow, ash. So anyway, that's the effort here is to really document where the oaks are. And very often where there's oaks, that's where you'll find the camas. That's where you'll find the prairie species. So they're all kind of connected that way. I mentioned the importance for biodiversity that I'll get into a little bit more. The regional conservation strategy this is a big piece of that. And so we're helping to facilitate that effort. The last slide of this talk, by the way, is going to be a page with a bunch of links, including a link to the regional conservation strategy. And then there's been a great decline of these habitats, 90 to 99% depending upon the habitat type. And that means the species that are associated with these habitats are having a hard time. Here's some just really general numbers in terms of what we have now compared to the historic. And this is for the whole Willamette Valley, not just the Portland area. Upland prairie, we have about 10,000 acres. Partly it depends upon how you define how native it needs to be to call it prairie. There's a lot more pasture that provides some habitat value for grassland species. About 10,000 acres, about 1% of the historic extent. For savanna, maybe about the same amount, also, just 1 or 2%. There is actually more oak woodland and oak forest than these other habitats. But a lot of that is former prairie or savanna that's actually converted into woodland. So that's also changed as well. But that's somewhere around 10 to 15%.
Can you please tell me the difference between a savanna and a woodland?
Yes, I will.
Oh,
that's coming up.
Sorry.
And here's a graph showing in red the percentage remaining compared to the historic to kind of illustrate that more graphically. This is an important point here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about fire and its role in prairie and savanna and oak habitats. These are all very fire-resistant species. So this is an excerpt from the journal of David Douglas, who was traveling through the Willamette Valley in the fall of 1826, headed to the Umpqua Valley in his famous encounter with the sugar pine. But anyway, in his journal on October 2nd, 1826, he said, "Course nearly due south, inclining to the west, country same as yesterday, rich but not yet a vestige of green herbage, all burned except in the deep ravines. As no place could be found suitable for fodder for the horses, we had to travel till 4 o'clock, when we camped at a low point of land near a woody rivulet. Marched 21 miles. My feet tonight are very painful and my toes cut with the burned stumps of a strong species of grass and spirea." And when he was making this journal entry, he was somewhere south of Corvallis, near Finley Wildlife Refuge, where this photo was taken. The larger photo shows a portion of the refuge right after it had been burned. And then the photo on the right is the same scene the following spring. So that shows the renewal that occurs with fire there. Okay, now I'm going to go into describing the different plant communities. Prairie and other open herbaceous communities, less than 5% tree canopy cover. That's kind of how the ecologists make the cutoff line. And there are different communities depending upon the soils and the hydrology that I'll mention. Upland prairie, typically in well-drained soils that aren't super dry and aren't really wet in the winter. Wet prairie, on the other hand, they're deeper soils, but because of the clay content during our winter rainy season, the soils are saturated. And that prevents the roots of the plants from obtaining oxygen. So only plant species that has specialized physiology will grow in the wet prairies. Herbaceous bald is a term that's used by ecologists to describe hillsides where there's really shallow soil over bedrock. And we have some of these around the Portland area, like Camassia and the Willamette Narrows and up near St. Helens. And then vernal pools are places where popcorn flower grows, actually. Typically low spots in the wet prairie where water might collect during the winter to about 6 inches deep. And then it dries out in the summer, and that's when the wildflowers bloom. Okay, next I'll talk about savanna. In a lot of ways, savanna is like prairie with some trees. And so this photo here is of a savanna with scattered oaks. And so most savannas did have oak in the Willamette Valley, but not all. Sometimes there were conifer savannas. Ponderosa pine or even Douglas fir could form a savanna. Or a mixture of oaks and conifers. So these were maintained by a certain type of fire regime that allowed a few trees to grow up and get big enough to be able to survive a fire here and there. This is a savanna that actually needs to burn because there's probably more small oaks coming up than there should be. Historically, these habitats were very extensive, like 500,000 acres in the Willamette Valley. But where you see this type of landscape structure, usually you don't have any native understory because it's been maintained by grazing of livestock. And the livestock tend to eat out all the native wildflowers. All that will grow there is native grasses, or non-native grasses and non-native forbs. Going a little bit farther into the spectrum is oak woodland, 25% to 60% tree canopy cover. And sometimes these are separated into two categories, an open woodland and a closed woodland, because some of the wildlife relationships are different. But generally there's enough light that reaches the ground for grasses and forbs to grow. It's not just ferns and shrubs. And a lot of what we have today that's woodland was historically savanna, and the tree density has increased since the mid-1800s. Historically, conifers were present in only low density, just kind of widely scattered. But with the absence of fire, conifers can colonize really well, and eventually they'll grow up through the oaks, shade them out, and kill the oaks. That's kind of the story that's repeated over and over on many Willamette Valley landscapes. And then finally, I'll get into the mixed oak conifer forest. This is actually the hardest kind of map because you have oak trees scattered in with big leaf maple and Douglas fir and grand fir, this mixture of trees, and it's hard to pick out the oaks. And this photo was taken in April, and that's one of the best times because the different hardwood species leaf out at different times of the spring. And you can see kind of a chartreuse in the lower left, and there's some others scattered around. That's big leaf maple that's flowering. Whereas the oaks are a lighter color, and the color that you see is actually the lichens growing on the oak branches. The oaks haven't leafed out yet. So there is a window in the spring and a window in the fall when the oaks are really conspicuous, but the rest of the time of the year it's not so easy. Okay, that's my really quick overview of the plant communities. If you have any other more detailed questions, maybe during the break, we can talk about them one-on-one or after the meeting. I'm going to get into some of the detail about the conservation value of these habitats. And one way to think about it is with this graph here. I've been working on a project to identify all of the native plant species that are associated with prairie, savanna, and oak habitats. And this is for the larger Willamette Valley, Puget Trough, Georgia Basin ecoregion. It's kind of this community of prairie and oak people from Eugene up through western Washington up to southern British Columbia. And so there's a lot of similarities in the flora across that region associated with prairie and oak habitats. And what I did is for each species I assessed whether it had really high fidelity to these habitats. Like you only see camas in a prairie or savanna or oak woodland. You don't see camas in a conifer forest. There are other species like sword fern that grow in a wide variety of habitats. Bracken fern is another example. Those are low fidelity species. And then moderate are kind of in between. As you can see, the vast majority of the plant species associated with these habitats are either high or moderate fidelity, either green or blue in this graph. So that really tells us that without these habitats, we're going to lose these species from the landscape. Now, a lot of the species are geographically widespread. They grow in California or east of the Cascades, so the species aren't going to go extinct. But there's actually over 20 species that are endemic to this ecoregion that are associated with prairie and oak habitats. So it's really up to us to work to conserve them along with these habitats. One of the pieces of the effort is the recovery plan for a set of species that have been listed by the federal government, by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as threatened or endangered, including Willamette daisy, Kincaid's lupin, Bradshaw's lomatium, Nelson's checker mallow, and Fender's blue butterfly. And so this is a document put together by the Fish and Wildlife Service 3 or 4 years ago. And the implementation is really exciting to see. There's a lot of interesting work that's being done, and the background photo here is of a habitat restoration project where native prairie species, including Kincaid's lupin, are being reestablished to recover the Fender's blue butterfly. Okay, what I'm going to do now is go through a really quick and dirty kind of overview of some of the noteworthy species or types of plant and wildlife species that are associated with these habitats. This is really just barely skimming the surface. But I'm going to show you photos of some of the endemic species that are associated with these habitats. And starting with the Willamette Valley bittercrest, Cardamine penduliflora. And it's the white flower that's growing at the base of the oak trees. It's actually not endangered. It's doing okay. And the reason is because it's a bittercrest. It tastes bitter and livestock don't eat it. So it'll do just fine in pastures because the livestock avoid it. But it's endemic to this area. Kincaid's lupin, now known as Lupinus oreganus, the name has changed. Found mostly in the Willamette Valley, a few sites in the Umpqua Valley, and one site up in southwest Washington.
And
yeah.
I have a request. As we go through these, if you know whether they are actually in the Portland area.
Yes. Well, hopefully I picked ones that are in the Portland area.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kincaid's lupin is in Washington County.
Okay.
Delphinium leucophaeum is a native larkspur that has mostly white flowers with little purple centers on the upper petals. And this is found only in the Portland area with one outlying population in southwest Washington. It should be blooming now. Places like Camassia and Willamette Narrows. This species is really having a hard time. It's kind of, I feel like it's kind of been ignored. The listed species have gotten all the attention, and this has kind of not gotten what it needs. But it is on a number of conservation sites. Next is Gorman's iris, and this is only found in Washington County in the Hagg Lake area. And so it's a very rare species. There's been some taxonomic questions about it that have now been resolved, and it's a good variety of what is normally purple flowered iris. You know, the iris tenax normally is purple flowered. Well, there's this different variety that's kind of got cream to yellow colored flowers in Washington County. And then the last one I'm going to show is the leafy pea vine, Lathyrus holochloris. And it's a native legume with kind of dirty white colored flowers, but found only in the Willamette Valley. So it's another endemic, particularly associated with savannas and oak woodlands. I'm going to shift gears to butterflies, and there's a lot of really important links between butterflies and native plants. I briefly mentioned the Fender's blue butterfly, which is an endangered species, and a lot of the reason it's an endangered species is because of the rarity of the plants that the larvae, the caterpillars, feed on. So Kincaid's lupin is one of those species. But there's plenty of other examples of these kinds of associations that are really interesting if you want to get into the natural history. Several species of checker spots, the variable checker spot here on the native sunflower, Wyethia angustifolia. There's another checker spot that is just recently been listed as an endangered species. I don't have a photo of that one though, so have to wait for another time. And then there are some butterflies that are associated with oaks in a particular way. The California sister, its larvae feed exclusively on the leaves of Oregon white oak. And there's another butterfly, not a butterfly person, so the name escapes me, but its larvae feed on the foliage of the mistletoe that's a parasite on the oak. So these connections, you know, very intricate connections. And then you bring in the human element, it's a really interesting story. Some of the wildlife species that are kind of focal species associated with prairie and oak habitats. The western meadowlark, the Oregon state bird, it's a grassland bird. It likes, well, grasslands are really open savannas, need something to perch on and sing. But it's the Oregon state bird partly because it used to be common throughout Oregon. In the Willamette Valley, though, it's really been declining, and there's really only a few hot spots around. I'm not sure if there are any areas in the Portland area where you can go and see it or hear it easily.
It's on the island, but not in the summer.
Okay.
They just come here.
Okay.
They're around a little bit in the off season.
Okay. The slendered-billed nuthatch used to be called white-breasted nuthatch. That's an oak woodland species, and very much on the decline. It's kind of a regional subspecies of a widespread species. So the subspecies that we have here locally is in trouble. The western gray squirrel, a native squirrel that is suffering from a variety of issues, but introduced non-native squirrels, such as the eastern gray squirrel, are a big part of its problems, as well as habitat loss. So the last slide here is just a quick view of the Cooper Mountain property, Metro's Cooper Mountain site, during a controlled burn, just to emphasize the importance of management. These habitats really need to be managed in order for them to survive on the landscape. And then also kind of that connection between the historic land uses and particularly the use of fire by native people. Now, there are ways to manage these landscapes without fire, which is kind of tricky to do. Mowing, sometimes even grazing can be appropriate. So that's a whole nother arena, that's a whole nother talk, but hopefully you guys will have the opportunity over time to find an oak site that it needs to be conserved, and then you'll see it being managed and restored down the road. I mean, that's kind of how this all ties together, I think. Okay, I think I have a minute for a question.
Great. Yeah, we're right on schedule.
Yay.
Let's take a couple questions.
So if you were driving by and wanting to spot oak savanna habitat or oak habitat, what do you look for?
What do you look for? Well, there are, part of it is learning the seasons. And so knowing what might be blooming at a particular time. There are certain plant species, for example, that you can identify from 65 miles per hour. Tufted hairgrass, which is one of the important native grasses. It's really distinctive. Camas, when it's in bloom, in large quantities. Checker mallow is another species. And Oregon white oak does have a certain kind of distinctive appearance to it. Both in the summer when it's leafed out, there's kind of a color and texture to it that stands out. And then also in the winter, the architecture of the canopy stands out, and the lichen growth on the branches. It's different from the lichen growth on a big leaf maple.
So you've got kind of the search image in your head, and you can do it at 65 miles an hour.
It can be done. Okay. Yeah.
We get good. That'll be our goal.
Yeah.
Are there other oaks around?
Yes, I wanted to mention that there are non-native oaks that are naturalizing. So English oak is a white oak that has leaves with rounded lobes, like Oregon white oak. The red oak that's native to eastern North America is naturalizing. Lots of oaks that are planted. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether a tree was planted long ago, and the farmhouse that used to be there is gone. And then in the southern part of the Willamette Valley, there's actually another native oak, the California black oak. So just in Wayne County, though.
Is there a problem with the disease that was going on with the oaks in California?
The disease that you're referring to is called sudden oak death, and so far it's only known to affect species in the black oak group. So it shouldn't be a problem for Oregon white oak. But there are lots of other insects and fungi that are associated with Oregon white oak in particular. So you may see a tree that doesn't look healthy. They grow slowly. They also take a long time to die, and in the process, they provide a lot of habitat value. So.
I read that the white oak hybridizes with a lot of the other two native oaks in the area. Is that something we would be seeing? Is it something we can distinguish? And does it provide the same sort of habitat?
I'm not aware of any oak hybrids in this area. In California, there are a number of different oak hybrids, and sometimes there are hybrid individuals that are found outside the range of one of the parent species. So it's not entirely impossible, but I'm not aware of any. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, how did the oak habitats for the south come about get mapped?
There was a kind of a joint project. I think it was funded by BLM through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and Tom O'Neill's organization did the work.
And it required ground truth.
Yeah.
Similar to what we're doing.
Yeah. They only mapped what they could see from a road, so they didn't catch everything. And then there are, well.
Yeah, they did come into our area a little bit.
A little bit, but yeah.
So we've got their data and we're looking at it, but they, like Ed pointed out, they didn't actually use, they used aerial photography, but they didn't do anything like what we're trying to do with pairing your work with the remote sensing and additional surveys. So it's a good start, but we want to do one better.
And the other thing I'll just add about that is because we are so fragmented in our habitat here, we really want to know where even single lines of oaks are for connectivity purposes. So we want a lot more detail than they were needing for their purposes.
And they really only just barely come into southern Washington County and southern, or part of Clackamas County in our region. So that's the other part of it. It's very incomplete for our whole region.
But I guess what I say is that for the rest of the valley, the oak mapping that exists isn't perfect either. So
Ours can be the best.
it will be. It will be. It is really one of those focusing on a smaller area will get you more. Yeah. Okay. So what's next?
Well, thank you, Ed. That was perfect.
Yeah.
So we are right on schedule, and we'll take 20